Welcome to Plus One Forward, the podcast powered by the Apocalypse, where we talk about tabletop role-playing games using or inspired by the Apocalypse engine. This episode continues our summer series about Firebrands games. I'm your co-MC Rach.
And I'm your co-MC Rich. Tonight we are joined by our guest Cole, who publishes on Itch as Magical. Welcome to the show, Cole.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Let's kick it off as we normally do. How long have you been playing Firebrands games, and what was your gateway?
So I've been playing Firebrands games for about 3 years now. My gateway into the Firebrands type of games was through the podcast Friends at the Table. They had played Mobile Frame Zero, Firebrands itself, during their series called Counterweight.
Nice.
But what really got me into it was when they hacked Firebrands with The Quiet Year. And they played that together during their Twilight Mirage series, which was really exciting. They had a lot of really good scenes in there, and it really got me interested in playing a game like Firebrands. I didn't know other games quite like it. From there, I got into a really fun campaign that I was doing. There was a hack called Divine Mundane, which perhaps you've seen.
Oh, yes.
It is by Han at Hamlet Games on itch.io. And yeah, I just had such an amazing time. It was a really good mini series we did. And yeah, I went from there and started making them.
Very cool. Aside, I have been running a play-by-post game that is not Firebrands, but a play-by-post game for going on 5 years. It started off as Monster Hearts and then it became Urban Shadows, but it's very Greek mythology inspired, and we've decided we're going to be mixing in some of the Divine Mundane games to mix in at times when it seems appropriate. So I think it's cool that you name check that game at that.
That is so
I'm
cool.
very excited by it. Hey.
I'm excited for you as a
Thank you.
third party.
Thank you. Well, let's jump on over here and talk about setting up.
Sure.
Setting up.
In the setting up segment of the show, our guests will discuss some part of Firebrands' tabletop play or play culture that they want to cast a spotlight on. Cole, what compels you the most about Firebrands games? What do you think our listeners who may have never touched a Firebrands game should open their mind to steal something from our normal format about Firebrands?
I think my favorite thing about Firebrands is its flexibility. So Firebrands is, in my mind, a concept, right? It's a series of mini games that you can use to facilitate conversation and to develop your characters. So in that way, you're able to take the Firebrands structure and plug it into a lot of different scenarios. So there's a lot of different play styles. I have been in games where, using the mechanics of Firebrands, we've been really able to push players, including myself, into different scenarios that we might not have normally done. For me, I'm not usually keen to throw my characters into a romantic plot. However, using the mini games in Firebrands, typical Firebrands games, hacks included, it's very easy to find your characters in those scenarios because you're asking questions that will lead you easily into romantic scenarios if you so choose. Or some people are really conflict averse, but there are mechanics in Firebrands games that allow your characters to have fistfights or duels. And it's really cool. I think it really pushes the narrative in a direction that maybe you wouldn't normally go in. That said, I also think I've been in some games where some people rely on the mechanics a little bit too heavily, and then it can be a little bit difficult to create like a natural flow of conversation. So for me, I happen to like to use Firebrands minigames and questions as kind of a baseline. It's ideas. Here's where I want to go with it, but I'm actually going to ask it in a fluid manner and maybe use this question in a way that it might not have originally been intended, but it has the same flavor. And so I really appreciate the openness of Firebrands to be able to do that. There isn't a lot of structure, I would say, that you are required to use in a Firebrands game. So I think it's really cool.
Cole, I had a question inspired by your first thought. You talked about Firebrands making a space for places a player might not always think to go.
Sure.
I have put Firebrands in some of the Firebrands games in front of people, and I love, personally myself, the more romantic mini games, but some of the language can be really intimidating, and the content in there can be a bit of a struggle for someone to reach out and challenge themselves to play it. What advice would you give to players who might want to engage these new spaces but might feel a little bit overwhelmed?
That's a really interesting question because I myself am aromantic and also asexual. So in my own personal life, I don't enter into these kinds of conversations readily. So playing these games, I think a lot of it has to do with setting expectations as a group before you start playing.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, having safety tools is extremely important in any game you're playing, but I would say Firebrands definitely needs it because you are going to be having fistfights or you're going to be having someone possibly kissing in your game. So setting the expectation, I'm interested in my character having a romantic interest if anyone else is interested in that sort of thing. Or, hey, is it okay if we play this game together? With all games, but in Firebrands, if you're going to play, there is an intimacy minigame that you can play. You can enter that and say, I'd like to play this with my character and your character. Is that okay? And of course, there has to be consent. So, you set your lines. You say, hey, I don't really want to get into kissing, but I'm okay if our characters hold hands, and then see if it gets there naturally. Sometimes it doesn't. Within a conversation, you think you're heading towards romance, and it turns into a fight, which is the beauty of a game, right? It really is about setting that expectation, coming to the table with everyone, understanding that, hey, this game is often geared towards romance. Is that okay with everyone?
Mm-hmm.
Allowing people to have an easy out. There are a lot of answers in the romance intimacy type of game that allows the character to remove themselves from the setting pretty quickly as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think the only other thing that I would say is I tend to use the questions as, like, I think I mentioned this before, as a base.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the questions can be quite rigid. It's very direct, and it's almost like giving, I guess, stage direction. I do this, what do you do, I knock over my coffee cup, do you help me or you laugh at me? And that isn't always naturally occurring in a conversation, right? If your characters are laughing about, you tripped on, blah, 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 and so went on a date with so-and-so, and then, oh, I dropped my cup, and do you, this is not part of the conversation, you're saying it out of character. So I think sometimes it can be quite abrupt in a natural conversation. I think using those questions as a guide is really helpful. Although I guess in some scenarios, it does make it a bit more dramatic when you ask directly. It can add quite a lot of pressure. So yeah, I think it's play with it how you will, right?
Well, hey, Cole, let's hop on over here to challenges so we can learn a bit about your game.
Sure, sounds lovely.
It's the challenge.
In our challenges segment, our guest will talk about the Firebrands game that they have designed. We have Cole on here. They have created Thy Words Inspire Thespians. Is that the right pause? Should I pause? Pause at the comma.
Yeah, dramatic pause is always welcome.
Yay! Thy Words Inspire Thespian. What's it about?
It's kind of funny. I created this on a whim. It's like one of those, I had a creative spark, and there was a game jam going on itch.io called Firebrands. It was, you had to rhyme with Firebrands. So I was like, how do I do this? And I thought, okay, this kind of works. It's similar enough. So Thy Words Inspire Thespians is about a group of theater folks who are getting ready to put on a big show, which would happen at the end of your game, or it can happen at the end of each successive game that you have. It's the hopes of making a name for themselves, having their names in light, and performing and enough like that your neighborhood basically appreciates your theater and you get more money and you get more fame or whatever it is that your characters particularly want. So you play as three main groups. So there's the performer, and I left it flexible enough. It could be a dancer, it could be a singer, it could be an actor, actress, whatever you'd like. There is the aesthetic, who is doing the makeup, the costuming, whatever it is that gives the show flourish. And then there's the stagehand, so someone who is either tech savvy or doing set design and building, construction, any sorts of things like that. So you basically start with your theater having very few resources. You might not have anybody in your audience. You might have holes in the seats or moldy floors or whatever you decide. And you're working to build that up. That particular setting or that particular stage setting for your theater is inspired heavily from Stew Pot. I don't know if you're familiar with Stew Pot by Takuma Okada, but Stew Pot is also another Firebrands hack, and you're building up a tavern. So in this, you're building up your theater. That's where that came from. So there's a bunch of different mini games. It's really about interpersonal connection, creating drama, right? Which is one of the big parts of Firebrands. Fall in love with your enemies, right? Create drama. And at the end, you're working towards a play, basically, is the big goal. You're putting on a show.
Very cool.
What mechanics are different in your game as opposed to Mobile Frame Zero Firebrands?
I used the basis. A lot of Firebrands hacks have very similar mini games, just kind of tweaked to its own theme. But I was inspired by a lot of different hacks. So I was thinking of Mobile Frame Zero, Divine Mundane, Stew Pot, For the Honor, which is the Magical Girls, Ocean Tides, and The King is Dead, which uses cards. There is a mechanic in my game where your main character can change their role to a different role mid-game. So it's basically training if you're a performer, but you think you'd be good at a stagehand. There's a mini game for you to play. You may not succeed. But I mean, the hopes would be that you do. And of course, in any game setting, if you really want your character to change, you could just narratively say that.
Mm-hmm.
However, I thought it was kind of fun to have a mechanic in there so that you may or may not get what you want. And then I also really like, it's a different game, but I like the game Good Society, and you get to create a lot of NPCs through that game. So I had a mini game in there where you can create your own understudy. So someone that you either have to train or, someone that comes in and might be looking to take your spot. You're not entirely sure, right? And then I am a person who likes icebreaker games, despite the collective societal groan of icebreaker games. So I included mini game that is a bunch of icebreaker games, and I tried to make them all kind of fit into a way that you could play them in person or not in person. It's a little bit more tough not in person because I have games in there like Red Light, Green Light, or Hot and Cold. Some of those are a little bit clunky. I think I'm still kind of working on the wording personally, how to make it a little bit more clear, my idea of how to play that not in person. But those are some of the games that I've included that I think are quite different.
Of these mini games that you have created, which one is your favorite, Cole, and why?
My personal favorite has to be Setting the Scene. It's called Setting the Scene, and it's where you're actually putting together and performing a small scene from the play that your characters are performing. I found, so at the beginning of the whole game, you're describing what kind of play or what kind of show you're putting on, whether that's going to be a musical concert or if you're going to be doing avant-garde. Are you doing a famous play? Are you doing a musical? And that's really all you get into, right, at the start. And then you're playing this game and you're having interpersonal connections between your characters, but I wanted something that allowed you to actually look at what you're doing for the show. And so I created Setting the Scene so that performers have a chance to take on their role. It's kind of, you're a person playing a character, so that's always fun. And,
layers within layers.
Exactly. Peel the onion. So the aesthetic and the stagehand characters would be taking either NPCs or filling in, or could be a director, for example. They would be choosing another character to play.
Mm-hmm.
And within this game, there are 10 different tables that I have, like random roll dice tables of elements that you could add to your scene. So it could be weather, it could be weapons, it could be what location you're in, smells, it could be phrases that your characters have to try and work into the scene, which is one of my favorites. And you can pick and choose which tables you want to roll on. I think the first game that I played, we decided to roll them all and try to fit them all in somehow. And it really makes for some good laughs. I think it really helps your characters flesh out what your theater is doing, what kind of play you're putting on. The last time I played, we were doing Cats the Musical in space with bounty hunters. So it was really a lot of fun to go there. And I think it's through this game that allowed us to develop that.
Wild.
Why don't we step over here and play some of the games?
On your turn, pick a game.
In playing the games, our guest will help facilitate playing a couple short mini games from their Firebrands game. Cole, you mentioned we should play a couple of games, one to maybe ground our characters and get a sense of what we're doing, and then lead into one of the bigger mini games, right?
Yes. So one of the cool things with Firebrands is the game Solitaire. I think it really helps to set up your character before you play anything. In my game, it's called The Limelight. You play by yourself after you've picked your department, and it gives you a direction. It's almost like when you're zooming in on a movie, it'll tell you just one sentence or two sentences about your character and the setup before you actually start the movie itself. It's kind of like that. So it just tells us what your character's doing before you actually play the game.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other game I think we could play is the game with the producer. So I think that would be a lot of fun. We can do them in order if you'd like.
All right, let's do it. I'll kick this off. I'm going to play the archetype of the performer, and I'll use my signature character of Plussy. So I read in the mini game and just choose one of these options, right, Cole?
Yes, that's right.
For Limelight, I will choose you got a new understudy, but they don't seem as committed to the show as they should be. Rach, Cole, do we think that this theater is a college theater or like an independent playhouse? What do we think?
You are the performer. What qualities were you leaning into?
My first thought was that this was a person who's just taking it for the easy A.
Definitely college.
Okay, there we go. So, yeah, there's a person here from the soccer team who was just taking this for an easy A and somehow was cast to be my understudy. And it is extremely stressful to me that George is my understudy. It is not fair to the play, and it is not fair to me for George to be in this position and for me to be in this position with George in the understudy position.
That's awesome. I'm really already in love with this character, and it's too bad I won't get to meet them more. So, is it okay for me to go next?
Sure.
Awesome. So, I will be taking the aesthetic. I'm struggling with the name. Somewhere between Beck, Becca, Beth, and Beffa with a F. So, I'm kind of liking Beffa.
Yeah, go
with
Beffa.
An F. And so my limelight is you have been taken in by the latest fashion trends, and you intend to push the theater wardrobe options to the limit in order to achieve peak fashion ideals. I think this involves a lot of scissors and some plastic.
But not in ways you would expect.
Yep.
For Limelight, I'll be playing my trademark character, Curtis, as a stagehand this time. Curtis has had it rough in the last little while. He's been assigned an assistant, almost a stagehand equivalent of our performer, I would say. And this assistant, my gosh, they keep messing up all of Curtis's settings. The equipment might be a bit unpredictable. Just letting you know, in case you need that for the plot.
Great.
It sounds like we're going to have a good theater. So yeah, that's kind of what Limelight is. It's pretty quick. Gives you a little bit of flavor.
Nice.
Yeah. So the other game that I thought might be nice to flesh out a little bit more is called A Famous Producer. This is an important producer is in town, and they want to review your show before opening night. And it must be perfect, so you pull out all the stops. So this game is heavily modeled on a game from Stewpot, where you're trying to get your tavern to have a better rating.
Mm-hmm.
So the producer is going to ask us to put on the show, which we will do, but in this minigame, we're actually not performing the show. We're talking about what it is that we are doing to make our show really pop for this producer. So each department head will have to partake in challenges, and then you will flip a coin. And if you get lots of successes, your theater rating will go up. And if you don't, well, you might get some feedback, from the producer. So in a game of 3, one player is the producer, and the other 2 people one person will take 1 challenge and the other will do 2. So I'm the aesthetic, so I will definitely do the aesthetic challenge.
Okay.
And it's up to you what you'd like to do from there.
Well, I'll definitely take the performance challenge.
Nice. Which leaves our producer.
I'm going to be producer Shelky. Seems like a very fitting name. But looking at the rules, we're to discuss where our producer came from, how important are they. We've established this is a college theater company, correct?
Yes.
We have.
Mr. Easy A. I think producer Shelky has come in from the next big city over, which isn't that big of a city, but it's big enough to have a theater that people will come drive into to go see productions at. She might be looking to hire someone or have a co-op position with people from this college theater group. That's my opening pitch.
I love it.
Nice.
Stakes are high.
They're very high. We're all very nervous and excited.
In high school, Plussy went to this theater and did a cold audition and failed miserably.
Wow.
So this is incredibly important.
Ooh, extra nerves. So, who would like to take the technical challenge? Would you like to, or would you like me to?
I want you to, since you threw that one out first. I want to see how this goes.
Sure. So, in the game, it's performance, aesthetic, and technical. We do not have to go in that order. If you don't mind, I'll pick one first, and then you can go and I'll go.
Works for me. I'm happy to see your performances and challenges, etc.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and start with my character aesthetic. So describe how you make the costumes and makeup stand out. Given that I'm pushing the limits of our wardrobe, I think our play may be something that's winter themed and everyone's dressed kind of like in summer. So I've cut a lot of the material of the costumes and I've sewn them to very random other pieces. Perhaps you wanted a headband. Well, now it is a waistband and it is got lots of different fabrics going on. I think a lot of people in our theater are very confused. They don't understand how this relates to our play. And I'm really trying to express my creative talent.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've got lots of colors going on. I think some people are wearing outfits that are fully plastic, like made from plastic bags, maybe all tied up and spray painted. I think it's actually pretty cool. We got a lot of neon colors going on. And I've actually dipped into my own pocket for the lead performer. And I have got a box of sparkles and Nerf balls. And I'm trying to incorporate this into their costume somehow. And I don't think that it has literally anything to do with our play, but that is what I'm doing. I'm trying to make it a bit questionable, I guess. That's where I'm coming from, because I want to challenge our producer. I want to challenge the minds of all these people at college. And I think I might be more into avant-garde than I realize. So that's where we're going. The game calls for me to flip coins. For this, when you create a character, you also typically have skills. I did not set up a skill, so I'm just going to say, maybe this isn't one of my skills. I'm not going to give myself an extra coin for that. Our theater rating, I believe we mentioned, was 1.
1.
Yes.
So I get 1 for our theater rating. And how many aesthetic characters are in your game? Which is just me.
1.
So I am only flipping 2 coins. So I'm going to go ahead and flip. I got 1 head and 1 tail. So a pass is only if you get 2 or more heads.
Oh, no.
Which means if all coins are tails, it's a failure. But I got a mixed result. So the producer is going to give me some constructive criticism for basically the whole aesthetic department. But you can aim it directly at my character. Beffa's ready.
The scene I have in my head is we have the costume with the glitter and the Nerf balls, and producer Shelky is very taken aback at how avant-garde this design is, but one of the Nerf balls gets unstuck from the costume and bounces across the stage and into her lap during the performance. So she picks up and is like, you might want to think about the construction. The idea is great, but the construction, they have to go hand in hand.
Oh, I'm devastated. I'm going to have to get with the stagehand and figure this out. What was their name again?
Curtis.
I'm going to have to get with Curtis. I can't believe it. I'm so embarrassed. At least no one tripped on it.
I will go next with the performance challenge. Describe what preparations you undertake to make this performance extra special. The first thing I do is I ask George to come outside with me so that we can perform some warm-up exercises. I lead him around a number of the other buildings, and then I sneak away and lock him out.
Oh no!
Oh my gosh.
So that I can perform without the understudy around.
We absolutely don't hear banging from the far end.
It's far, far away. I'm sure no one will notice. They'll think it is the sound of a dropping Nerf ball.
Probably.
I take the stage in my mostly plastic, sparkly Nerf ball costume, which is avant-garde for a noir play. And I perform the scene. It is, luckily, a monologue, as this 40s style gumshoe play. He does the version of the string, the strings bulleted up onto the wall, and Plussy is a little heavy into the histrionics. He saws the air with his hands a few times. He is overly nervous, but he does his best to pull off this dramatic revelation of the second act. This is who I think the killer is. Now I have to flip a number of coins equal to the theater rating plus the number of performer characters. And if I have any skill that they highlighted using in this show, I'm going to cheat and say yes. Monologues is his skill. I'm going to flip 3 coins. And the first coin is a heads. Boy, that is a really dramatic website. It flips many. Here, I'm going to share screens just so you can see the drama that is inherent in this web.
Oh, I'm so excited.
There's even the sound of a coin flipping on the website. It's quite good.
Amazing.
So the first result was heads. The second is tails. Oh, it's a 1 heads, 1 tails. This is the final moment. Will Plussy pull this off with a second heads? Will he be successful?
Oh no!
Tails, deny me, website. Performance was better than you say.
The producer gives constructive criticism to the department involved in this challenge. Producer Shelky really buys into that energy you're bringing, but there's almost a grim edge, like too much of that inner frustration that Plussy had involving George is boiling up to the surface. And it's like, you're great, you have potential. I know you're working in there's a mismatch here, but you need to let more of the character stand out and less of your inner demons.
I cannot deny your feedback and its accuracy.
Amazing. All right, technical challenge. We do have a technical stagehand, but since you're playing the producer, obviously,
yes,
I will take the role. For the technical challenge, describe what you do to make the theater look and feel welcoming. Are there special transitions or lighting tricks you try out? Do you have a brand new set piece you'd like to break in? So this is noir, right? You mentioned?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I think what this stagehand has done has taken the odor of the sewer and pumped it into the theater.
Oh, Lord.
There's a new fog machine. They're using the typical lighting effects that you would anticipate. In this case, there's a lot of blues going on. So there's the fog machine is the new piece, and the smell is sewer. And I think it's not necessarily supposed to feel welcoming, but it is supposed to really put you in the mood for a good...
Sure sets you in a certain place, right?
It sure does. So I think it's really that simple. I am going to go ahead and flip my coins. We're not starting off on the best foot here with coins. Is there a skill I can add for sewer stench?
Does Curtis have a sewer stench related skill?
Yeah.
So I had balance and pyrotechnics, and you are using a fog machine, so I'll allow it.
Amazing. All right, I will flip 3 coins then. So the first one is tails.
Oh, please.
Tails. And heads. Oh no, we got another mixed result. This is not boding well for our theater. Please give me the criticism. Constructive, please. Be kind.
Producer Shelky, she enjoyed the stench more than the fog machine. There was, I think, some questions about if there was some kind of mechanical issue with the bathrooms, but she's assured about it, that it is, in fact, that's a technical effect. That is not, in fact, the bathrooms. It's meant to smell that way. But with the fog machine, she points out that you might want to consider accessibility and safety rules, because this is a lot of fog. Do you know what your guidelines are for, like, your at this college? Have you talked to, like, health and safety services at the college?
I think in this case, Curtis just gives a blank stare and is like, yep.
It's like I'm talking to myself. Oh, God.
Oh, my goodness. So that was beautiful. And so we need a review in the paper. We have failed to pass 2 or more of our challenges. So the producer should describe a mediocre review in our paper. And if we were continuing play, we would consider how we would change things on opening night. And let that guide play.
Headline, earnest first attempt.
Oh, brutal.
Oh. Ouch.
The article talks about the experimental performances, costuming, and set design that, again, show promise. And perhaps if somebody is following the careers of these people, this might be the ground floor to get in on, but it's not there yet.
Oof.
I've carefully cut out the part of the article with the phrase that I've now highlighted in yellow highlighter, took a big swing. And that's in my dressing room.
Amazing.
Beautiful.
Well, Cole, thank you so much for letting us play a few games of Thy Words Inspire Thespian.
Sure, it was a lot of fun.
Cole, if our listeners want to follow more of your work online, where can they find you?
Sure. So you can follow me on itch.io. I'm magical, spelled MAGICOLE. I'm also the most magical on most places like Twitter, Twitch, Instagram, other social media places like that. I'd also like to give a quick shout out to the Roll Plus Bond community, which has provided me a really safe and encouraging place to not only play tabletop role-playing games, but also without which I probably wouldn't have tried my hand at game creation. You can find Roll Plus Bond on Twitch at Roll Plus Bond, and we do annual 72-hour charity streams there.
Well, thanks again, Cole, for coming on Plus One Forward, being part of our Firebrands summer series.
Thank you for having me.
Plus One Forward is a production of the Gauntlet community, Richard Rogers and Rach Shelky. You can find us at gauntlet-rpg.com or follow us on Twitter at @+1FWD. If you would like to support our show, visit our Patreon site at patreon.com/gauntlet. The games mentioned on this show use the Apocalypse engine, which is a creation of Vincent and Magay Baker. The music for Plus One Forward is from the Savage Aural Hotbed CD Gomi Daiko. The songs used are Gomi Daiko, metal version, and Drowning Attitude. You can find more amazing tunes by Savage Aural Hotbed on their website, www.savageauralhotbed.com.
Listeners, we want to let you know that Hearts of Wulin, our PbtA game of wuxia melodrama, is now available as a PDF on DriveThruRPG. Hearts of Wulin emulates films like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon and Shadow, and TV series like The Untamed and Ancient Detective. It is inspired by the Chinese martial arts novels of Jin Yong and Gu Long and their many adaptations. In these tales, romance is as dangerous as a blade. You can buy Hearts of Wulin at the Gauntlet store on DriveThruRPG. You can find more information and resources for it on our Gauntlet blog, on the Gauntlet webpage at gauntlet-rpg.com.